Hello everyone and welcome to FiST Chat, the vodcast that features discussions on the topics of film, science and technology. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? Are we feeling flexible?
I'm feeling very flexible, Ben. Hello FiST Chat fans. Welcome to the FiST Chat ecosystem. You've joined.
Absolutely. We'll just be expanding beyond belief before you know it. All right. Just our usual housekeeping. Don't forget our website's www.fistchat.com. You can subscribe to our audio via iTunes, RSS, and FeedBurner. And you can get all of our back episodes and our current videos on YouTube, Vimeo, and Digicosm TV. So across all those links, you can get everything we produce, as well as our social media feeds, Twitter, Google+, Facebook. Make sure you interact with us and join in on the discussion. We're always looking for that. And of course, our supplementary content, the weekly blogs, our photography on Instagram, Flickr. And don't forget, recommend us to anyone who may be interested in what we cover each week. Now, we've got a couple of topics we'll be covering today, but we're starting with how do we navigate this idea of a content ecosystem where they've sort of sprung up in the... they sort of started quite a while ago, but they've really come to fruition, I think, in the last few years as something that, sort of a location for where you can consume content. And perhaps before we get into looking at some of the major players, I think it's important to note that these content ecosystems have actually changed the way we consume content, and quite radically, I think. As a side note, it's not as simple as buying a DVD and then if you decide you want to pass that on to someone, you can't, because it's locked. Because in a content ecosystem, that content is locked to your Apple ID or Amazon ID or Google ID. So what do you think about that, Steve? I think we touch on that where Bruce Willis, that fake story about Bruce Willis being upset that he couldn't gift his iPod music collection.
Well, it's not actually such a it was a good hoax, but it's not such a silly idea. Just historically, of course, Microsoft tried with .msn years ago to lock everyone into a gated online community, which was the very first ecosystem. Now, I think, as you say, it's quite interesting to see how it will play out. But I don't think it's not that it's not just ideal for the consumers or for you and me in terms of not having the flexibility or freedom. And we mentioned this with textbooks as well. Yeah. If you ever were to get rid of your iPad, then maybe it would travel with the account, but the next person can't use it. And then the other thing on top of that too is that with the sale through the online stores, the actual content producers do not get direct contact with their audience or with the people that purchase their product, and that can be a problem.
Well, that's an important point to note, and I think a lot of the big content providers are having big issues with the likes of Apple, Amazon, and the like, because they really want that subscriber information, and it was quite easy for them to get that when they were selling books directly or selling DVDs directly or selling movie tickets or whatever else. But because these big tech giants are owning the subscriber information, and they know they've got them over a barrel on this, because they won't yield on it. They either have to give up that information or they're not going to be in that space, which could be damaging to their bottom line.
Well, that's right, and that's why I don't think that the closed ecosystem will ultimately work, because I think, what will happen is all it will take is one of the players, and we might speculate most likely that would be Google, would break ranks with the other ecosystems, open themselves right up, and I think all the benefits that would go with that, such as a transferability of, your content and content you've purchased, from device to device, from person to person, will probably, ultimately attract people. But, we've seen this as being some sort of battlefield for quite a while now, and it's definitely shaping up that way.
Well, I mean, just as an example, it's probably important to note to everyone that as it stands now, you buy your movie, your TV show, or music, or whatever, and that gets assigned to your ID that you've signed up with the service, and it doesn't get transferred. And also, if, for example, you pass on, as
Like
as we
Bruce Willis
say,
was concerned with.
like Bruce Willis was apparently concerned with, that does not get transferred to anyone. You cannot gift that to anyone, which would ultimately lead to, the next user, whoever that is, they have to rebuy it, or they have to buy it for themselves, in effect. And that's quite amazing, because in some sense that would probably spur more sales for the content providers, but it's just a little strange because it's like you're not owning it. You're renting it for a long time.
Well, it does. It raises a whole range of consumer issues, and no one's tested the law, but I'd be very interested to see what would happen if they did. But also on that, one of the great things about online publishing of any sort of content is that there are no overheads because you don't actually have to deliver anything. There's just the charge on the data transfer, I guess.
Yeah.
But as we know, the online stores charge the content producers fairly high tariffs to sell their work, and that's just really just filling in the costs that used to be involved in creating a hard copy and distributing it. So, ultimately, it's not really passing on the savings that probably the end user deserves. I mean, it's very interesting how the ecosystem has come to sort of reach its peak at the moment. And I think that's largely been driven by the iPod, in fact, and the original iTunes store, and the fact that Apple had a huge advantage in terms of tech and device for a long time. Now everyone's caught up. The only thing that's really different is the experience within the operating system, and most of those are very similar. Yeah. So the reality is that, it's going to come down to content producers maybe even preferring a platform that gives freedom and that, the users have chosen because they want the freedom.
Absolutely.
And that'll lead to a bit of a brawl, and those that don't, get on board end up like Nokia and BlackBerry.
Exactly. I mean, if you have a look at the actual the ecosystems themselves, just a couple of the big ones, like you said, you mentioned the iTunes store, which is probably arguably one of the oldest. The Amazon store is actually also it's getting fairly mature now as well. You've got the Google Play Store, which is coming in. You've got the Microsoft Store, which is sort of in its infancy, and the jury's out as to whether it'll actually gain traction with all of its Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8 devices. Now, it might be confusing to figure out, which one do I pick, because when you're buying one of these devices, you're not buying actually the device, you're buying into this ecosystem. And once you're in the ecosystem, it can be very hard to change everything because you have to basically rebuy everything on the other competitor's ecosystem. So that raises a whole other issue. But I think it's probably, you can actually mix and match, I think, which is an important thing. And actually, Amazon's really good at this. As an example, I read books on my iPad. I can look up, because the Kindle is on every app, and Kindle has an app for everything and is pretty much available on any device. I can put the Kindle app on my iPad. I've still got the iBook store, which means I could look at the Amazon store and iBooks, compare say which one's got a cheaper copy, and then download from the relevant one. And I think that you might be able to get a bit of that happening across a lot of things, especially if you can mix and match like that. And it's probably important that you don't necessarily think you have to be locked into one particular ecosystem if you can do that sort of thing.
That's a really good point, Ben. There are ways around it, and I think we'll see more and more of those ways around it because, the owners of the ecosystems, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, whoever they are, they can do whatever they want. But if they create a product that people don't want or it just doesn't suit them, the first thing that we always see in the I guess the mobile world is somebody creates an app which is a workaround, and then after that someone will actually create an operating system or ecosystem that includes those freedoms, and then the next thing is it all unravels. So
Yeah.
I think we might see some big changes in the market over the next few years.
Yep. And just one final note on ecosystems before we go into our news bites. I was actually reading quickly today that apparently behind closed doors, Microsoft is trying to negotiate Apple down on its 30% take. So for selling their Office for iOS app, because they don't want to give Apple 30% for it. Well, we might come back to that depending on how it all turns out. That could be quite interesting, because if Microsoft manages that, that might change a few things, because they might set a precedent.
Well, yeah, I can't imagine Apple would budge on that. Microsoft would have to put in a good sweetener, I reckon.
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on to our news bites now and change tack. We've got a few different things to cover, and also we sort of briefly alluded to one in the outset. Now, if we look at our film one, we talked about Robo-Apocalypse late last year, and we're looking forward to that, but it would seem that Spielberg has put it on hold indefinitely because he can't find a way to do it that wouldn't be so expensive and would also do justice to the material, which is kind of a good thing, because you don't want to see a shoddy version of the film being made.
Is that code for an investor pulled out?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
But it is good to see him holding back. I think he'd be one of the few people in Hollywood that would actually make a call like that. Many others would just go ahead
And do it and make their money out of it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll move on to our science news bite, and this was a bit concerning for in the weather pattern, climate change sort of arena. The Weather Bureau here, it was in Australia too, I believe, actually made sort of global headlines when they added a new colour to the temperature map. Deep purple that represents temperatures in the 50 to 52 degrees centigrade mark. And bright pink for those that reach 52 to 54 degrees centigrade. So that's, if they're sort of planning out for that, then it can't be too good.
Well, that's it. It does get hot out there, and suddenly everyone's interested in it. I think I don't know that things are getting hotter, as it has been inferred by some, but I think it's just that people are more interested in the heat dispersion, and certainly in a place like Australia, the hotter it gets in the centre, where most of us live around the edges, it gets hotter as well. So that'll be something to keep an eye on.
And the funny thing is that the minute, like we're in summer now in Australia, the minute that we start to get some hot weather, all of a sudden we're talking about, oh my God, climate change is back. When, only 6 months ago people were saying, oh, it's raining. It's not, there's nothing to worry about.
That's right. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And our final news bite, our tech news bite, flexible phones. Now, we mentioned this I believe you mentioned this in our predictions episode at the end of last year, and right on cue, Samsung delivered a prototype that they demonstrated quite successfully, I would have thought. It was an impressive looking thing, a flexible smartphone made out of an OLED, and I don't know quite what to make of this. It's got some interesting possibilities. Like you mentioned it before we got on, the idea that the tablet could fold into the size of a phone, or perhaps, maybe even a watch, that a high-tech watch you can wrap around your arm, your wrist.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting sort of applications for that. And I guess this kind of thing's been speculated for a while, and now it seems to be becoming a reality.
Yeah, I mean, these are the things. These happen so slowly. I'd say, the flexible phone's great, but it's only the start. So flexible screens, flexible phones, they'll probably be a little bit bendy or something. I don't know that they'll be foldable in the first, first generation, but they will soon. I mean, we will see great advances in this technology. With nanotechnology, we'll actually see LCD quality on things that are probably about, the thickness of a tablecloth. We're now starting to do some really high-tech stuff and see some big developments, and this is the start of it.
Absolutely. And that video you sent through on YouTube about liquid metal marbles, that was also a nice little tie-in as well. We'll throw that up on our social feeds.
Definitely check that out. I mean, that's liquid metal, and it's bound together. You see the two videos. The liquid metal bound together with nanoparticles maintains its shape, and that's what will allow us to do folding, bendable, all sorts of materials.
Absolutely. All right, Steve, we're out of time. So thanks again for the chat.
Oh, thank you, Ben. Thanks, FiST Chat fans. Tweet us with the ecosystem you like best.
Absolutely. All right, so that's it for this week's episode. So we'll catch you next week.